Hello, welcome to Shamanism, Metaphysics, and Grace. I'm Lauren Hubele, and I'm here sharing a series of interviews with my mentor, Jyoti Wind. Jyoti, welcome. I'm so glad you could be here with me again today.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. I love it. My pleasure.
Yeah, so Jyoti, both of us are smiling and joyous, and we're coming up against a topic today that not everyone may see the same way we do. And that topic is death. Um, so I know you would like to open up the space in a sacred way for us before we dive in, but you can see my horses are already racing and ready to talk about, eager to talk about this. Why don't you open our space first, though?
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Grandmothers and grandfathers, spirits of the East, we call to you. We ask for your insights, the spark of the idea that will take us into the next round. Grandmothers and grandfathers of the South, we call to you. We ask for the ignition of our own passion, our own creative energy. Grandmothers and grandfathers, healing spirits of the West, we call to you. We ask to learn how to receive what is ours. Grandmothers and grandfathers, wisdom keepers and ancient mothers of the North, we call to you. Bring us your wisdom. Teach us how to truly see. Grandfather Sky, we ask for your protection. Grandmother Earth, we ask for your mercy and compassion and the reminder of our own. And to that wise being in our hearts, may that being be present as well. So I have something I'd like to share. It's called The Soul Calls. The soul calls, and you pack your bag of unfulfilled dreams for the next time. Like the bittersweet strains of the Pachelbel canon, you glance back, memories of love given and received wash over you. You realize what it's all been for. Your epitaph is written on the hearts of those who loved you. Bidding farewell with faith and trust as your companions, you pass through the door that beckons, free at last.
I've been looking forward to this topic all week, Jyoti. And as I reflected on what is coming up for me around it, I realized how much fear I used to hold around the topic of death. And it came from the culturing and belief system I grew up within, and how that has changed over time to seeing death as a beautiful entry into the next chapter. And I'm so curious how you define the death process or the death experience, and also what helped get you to that belief system.
Well, growing up in my family, my father had an abject fear of death. If the subject came up, he'd leave the dinner table. And he just couldn't deal with it. And I was glad when he died that it was a sudden death. I mean, I know from my own experiences that there's no time. And even though it seemed like his death was sudden and total, I would imagine that his process of falling to the floor, that he might have had a whole lifetime to review in those moments besides afterwards. So it was always something in the background for me of, why was he so afraid of death, and how did I feel about it? And I mean, when you're young, you don't think about death very often. Once in a while it might come up. Especially if a family member dies, and then you kind of step into that arena for a while, and then you go on with your young life. So I see death as a transition. We have many deaths in our lives. We leave a relationship, or we leave a place where we've lived and loved, and we go into something new. And so I feel like there's many deaths, many transitions that we experience, including how we see ourselves. We transition from one phase of consciousness and awareness in our lives to others, and we leave things behind. And sometimes we mourn that loss a little bit, especially if, let's say, we had lived somewhere that we really loved, and all of a sudden we're in new territory and new people and new ways of looking at things. And so sometimes there's a letting go. And so I think that's all practice, because, as some mystics say or think, as soon as you're born, you start to die. It's out there at the end of the life. And people who have had near-death experiences report back how easy it is, and how blissful even it is, and how rewarding it is. And it takes the sting out of leaving here for those who can hear what they're saying. For them, it's just, well, I came back because I was sent back, or I decided to come back, and I have no fear of death. And so they've been able to kind of impregnate the culture with this idea that death is not an awful thing. It's not an end, but a transition into something else.
Mm-hmm. Jyoti, you have such a rich belief system around this. I'm really curious. How did you acquire this?
I don't know.
I love it.
I don't know. Just reading, studying, meditating, the shamanic journeys, and working with people on the other side through the shamanic journeying venue called Psychopomp work, which we'll talk about another time, and helping to ferry souls who are kind of stuck. Other than that, I mean, it's just because I have a real focus on death. There's something about death that's very seductive and very intriguing, as kind of like the next big adventure, And I believe that as we have guidance when we come here into this world, being born, that we also have guidance when we leave here. It's a funny thing, Lauren. It's kind of like we come down into earth, down relative. We come into these human bodies, and we have this life experience, and our parents hopefully introduce us to the language and the culture of where we're born, and we make our way, and we live our life, and we go through our lessons and learning process, and then we come to an end, and the soul calls. It's not so much about when the personality says, I've had it, I've had enough,
Right.
I'm out of here. It's more that the soul has gotten what it needed in this life experience. And then all of a sudden, the body goes through something in order to release the soul, and the soul to release the body.
So that's a very different perspective than I think most Westerners hold. They hold the idea that the body gives out
Right.
and then the soul returns home or things in, just depending on how you've been schooled.
Yes. Yes. Um, I think I've been influenced a lot by Eastern thinkers and Eastern teachings, because it made sense to me.
Okay.
Because when my father looked at death, he saw nothing else, and that you just go to sleep. And I would imagine that whatever you believe to be the truth, you have the experience of that, and then perhaps awaken
Mm-hmm.
to what else there is and what other possibilities there are.
Mm. Yeah. Jyoti, has your study of astrology influenced your thoughts around death?
Well, for myself personally, with my own chart, yes, I could see why I was always drawn to that subject.
Okay,
Yes.
because that actually was something I thought about. Are certain people with certain astrological, lineups, so to speak, more interested in death, and are others more prone to be afraid of it?
Um, I think it's upbringing and culture,
Hmm.
for one thing, at least in most people's background. And then and we don't revere death. We don't revere age in this culture anymore. I think at one time we did. I know the native cultures here revere age and wisdom gleaned from a long life. But the overriding culture, to use that term, um, doesn't, it's a youth-based culture, so it doesn't really revere age and wisdom and death and dying as a rite of passage and as something to be honored and revered and dealt with in a very sacred way. And so as far as astrology goes, Scorpio people and people with with Scorpio tendencies, they are the people who deal with transition. You're no longer this, you're not yet that. There's no language for that in between place. It's like a woman being in labor and she goes through transition. She's no longer a single woman. She's not yet a mother. She's in that in between place, which for some people it's difficult to make that transition. For other people it's easy. And so the same with death and dying. I mean, now there's death doulas that help people make that transition, help the family prepare, wash the body after the soul has left, and treat that shell, if you will, that body, that shell that the soul occupied, with the reverence it deserves from having had a being occupy it. um, there's new ideas about the body and how to bless the body and dispose of the body. There's many different new things that are coming up, green burials and all those kinds of things. um, so going back again to astrology, so people who have a strong eighth house in their chart, I happen to have Jupiter there, and so it's something that has always been with me, helping people through their transitions of awakening, or going through places in their own life and consciousness where all of a sudden they're coming to some things and maybe aren't sure how to deal with them.
In listening to you, and you made a statement on, from the moment we're born, we're preparing for death. And I think it seems that depending on your belief system about death, it will certainly influence how you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're really afraid, then there's a lot of fear that gets cultivated through the life, and a lot of um, taking advantage of situations or not taking advantage of situations, that come along, if there's a fear of death. For me, it's more giving that energy to the soul. I mean, the soul chooses. The soul chooses the birth. I believe the soul chooses the parents. That's not to minimize some of our experiences at the hands of parents or of being parents. And because the soul has a desire for a certain set of experiences here, and gives free will to the personality of the person, to choose and make choices and say no or say yes to whatever is drawn to that person in their life. And it's more when the soul is ready, when the soul has had what it needs to have, it signals in some way the personality, okay, it's time to leave. It's time to pack your bags. It's time to get ready.
What are your thoughts about folks that linger in that state, that they don't quite surrender to death? We all have different experiences with people that hold that space for quite some time.
I think that maybe there's just something they didn't get yet. I mean, I remember talking to my grandfather. He was 89, and he said, I pray every day for God to take me, and he's not listening, or he's not taking me. And I said, Pop, look, life is like fourth grade. When you've learned what you need from fourth grade, you move on to fifth grade. I said, maybe you just haven't learned what you needed to learn completely yet. And you'll go when you're ready, when it's time. Maybe not your time, but the time. And so that was the only conversation I had with him ever about death. But and he died suddenly. He had an accident and he died suddenly. But it was probably about 2 or 3 years after we had that conversation. So maybe there were just some things he needed. I mean, who am I? I have no idea. It's his soul, between his soul and his personality. And when his soul said, okay, we're done here, we've gotten what we could get in this life, time to go. I mean, I'm making it very cut and dried and very simple sounding, and for people to let go of their family, to let go of their life, their identity, their sense of self. I mean, the personality has to let go, easily or not easily.
Yeah, that's. I had a diagnosis at one point in my life where I was told that my life would be very short, and to expect death at any time. And at that time, I felt like I was running from death, right? Like
Yeah.
I wanted to outrun it and do all the things. And I remember this point where, first of all, that becomes really exhausting. But I realized that in that running, I actually was missing out on all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. Lauren, it reminds me of a deathbed meditation that Peter Levine used to do. He was a cohort of Ram Dass, and he worked a lot with inmates in prisons, prison projects. And I'd like to do that
Yeah,
with you.
let's do that.
Okay. So it's very simple visualization and very short. And so you take a nice deep breath and just relax. And you picture yourself on your deathbed. You're in a bed in your room, let's say, And you know how people are around people who are dying, they're kind of removed. So you can hear the voices outside your closed bedroom door. They're trying to figure out what to do with you, or what's next, or should they rally for you, or do you need something more? You know, they're having that, you can hear the voices, the echoing of the voices outside the door. And you're laying there on your deathbed, and you know, you just kind of sense and feel into what that's like. Your life is over. You've done what you could do. You've learned what you could learn, what you thought you could learn, and you're getting ready to leave. You're getting ready to let go. And you think about, for a moment, you think about all the things you didn't do for one reason or another. You think about the places you didn't go. You think about the people you didn't tell how much you cared for them or loved them or appreciated them in your life. You think about the parts of yourself you didn't express, that you didn't really give enough time to. And so rather than die with regrets, you get up off the deathbed and you go and set those things in motion in your life. And that's the end of the visualization. You actually get up and go and do those things that occurred to you while you were laying there. And it can be very powerful and empowering for a person to realize as if they're at the end of their life, what that was like and what they didn't do. And in those quiet moments, what they really long to do, and get up and go do it. I mean, why not?
So beautiful. Jyoti, I think that's all anyone needs to know about this topic.
Maybe. It's a huge topic. You know, this is just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it certainly opens the door to the topic we'll be exploring next, and that's afterlife.
Yeah. Psychopomp work with from the shamanic point of view, and the ferrying of souls, and yeah, how that all works.
Great. I can't wait to explore that further with you. Jyoti, thanks so much for sharing all your wisdom today.
My pleasure, Lauren. Thank you.